Greetings, everyone. This is the last live stream of March. Let me know if you can hear me okay. See me, hear me. Oh, sorry. Don't want to kill the ambiance. We got to have my glowing green cactus. There we go. And even today, maybe. What's up, Mr. Landfill? Time to get ready. I also will add to my Australian hat, my South Point hat, which is just one. You can't buy these. You can only win these with a special high hand. I don't even wear hats, but I wanted one because I like being special. How's everyone? Five by fives. Awesome. Good to know. Um, Today we are mostly going to be talking about all the goings on and how that relates to prepping. But first, as usual, especially since this is the last day of the month, helping your brother move. Oof. I remember I had a moving sucks and everyone wants you to move for beer and pizza, and you're like, man, I'm 40 years old. I don't need to destroy my body to get myself some beer and pizza. Hire yourself a damn mover. But if you have a truck or a van or something, everyone's like, hey, you still got that van? And you're like, who's moving? Horrible. But don't forget, last day of, so by the end of tomorrow, if you haven't signed up for the Patreon, you cannot win the three prizes. First of which, 25 extra entries for April's drawing. Second prize, Houdaman, awesome bushcrafting slash survival knife with leather sheath. I really like this shape and size and format. Fantastic. And then we also have, if it's legal in your area, this Gonzo, awesome assisted opening slash automatic. I mean, I've normally seen the automatics referred to when it's out the front or OTF automatic, I guess, but this is still considered automatic or still button. Super cool. So those will be given away to anyone who is a paid Patreon signed up by the end of the day tomorrow. And then I will do the drawing the first live stream in April. It'll probably be Sunday, as usual. Leaving California, going to Texas, great choice. Yeah, that is a good choice, probably. Like I've seen, I even commented on Twitter though, like I would never want to live in somewhere deep blue. And I know all the big cities, including Vegas, are technically blue, if not at least purple. But the state matters a lot, and it's a different type of blue here than say Portland or New York or LA. The overall laws are not nearly as bad. The overall vibe is different. You don't have the DAs going after people for self-defense and things like that, like you do in some of these cities. But I would never want to live in one of these deep blue places, even somewhere as physically awesome as California. But at some point you can't. Everyone always like, well, just fucking leave. Why are you there? And like, if we just always cede territory to the crazies, eventually you're just gonna lose it all. At some point, somebody has to fight them for, metaphorically speaking, um, resist them. Resist this takeover. So but I don't blame people who want to leave. But at some point. You got to go after it. And Lucius Cincinnati says, "What was it like jumping off a cliff? It was fucking awesome." And for those of you who don't know, let's do a quick screen share here. I think you guys have probably all seen the video by now, but we'll do it anyway. Screen share. This is what I did last weekend. Not last weekend, as in like 2 days ago on Friday in Moab, Utah. You guys ready? If you haven't watched it, this was me 2 days ago. Yeah, so that was amazing, super awesome, totally worth it. Um, It was like in Moab, Utah, which there's no nearby airport, so I had to drive like 7 hours because the closest real airport is Salt Lake City, which is like 4.5 hours away. Or they have a Canyonlands airport, which is like an hour and a half, but it's extremely, or not extremely, but it's much more expensive as such a small airport. So I've been wanting to do that for a while. Planning on doing it for my 40th birthday, but everything was jacked up because of my surgery and stuff. So then I had a chance to do it this year, and I took it. It was freaking awesome. Um, Gerber Covert Auto best knives I've had. I mean, like one of the. No, wait, this isn't Gerber. This is Benchmade, but I love it. Does that mic pick up that sing? It goes ding. Great. I love it. A lot of fun. Um, Grew up in New Hampshire, moved to LV in 2018, came back to New Hampshire in 2022. What's the weight limit on that thing? I don't know. I didn't see any specific. It's a climbing rope, like high. They use like multiple climbing ropes. I'm sure it can handle someone up to 250 or something. I mean, if you were like 400 pounds or something, it probably wouldn't. They'd have a weight limit. I am not very heavy. I'm only about 160, 165. The interesting thing about the group that was going was it was mostly women. I was like looking around. I'm like, wow, that's surprising. It was like 10 or 12 women and only four men, including myself. It was awesome. Where was that? Looks like Mars. It was Moab, Utah. 3 or so seconds of just falling was incredibly crazy because you get that initial jump and then your body just starts short circuiting because it's literally no different than just hurling yourself off a cliff without the rope. You just have to like consciously that like okay, I'm connected, but the exact falling experience is exactly the same as if you were just killing yourself and jumping off the cliff, and it takes the same like mental. You have hundreds of thousands if not millions of years of genetic development telling you not to do this, and then you're like, ah. So it's really crazy. Your brain starts to short circuit, maybe try to right itself. Pretty wild. Super intense though. No splashdown, luckily. But that was awesome. Figured I would get that in before we have to shut ourselves into the bunkers for the rest of the year. And that's what I'm mostly talking about today. If you guys have any topics, of course, think about them, throw questions in the chat, whatever. But what we're seeing with regards to, as good as everything is looking with Russia, and I really don't think that the U.S. I think Trump and the people in the U.S. know that the outcome. I was arguing with a friend about this too because I was like, the war with Ukraine is over unless we have direct NATO involvement. They're like, it's not over. So I'm like, all right, maybe being pedantic. It's not over. It's the fighting may continue maybe even for a couple years beyond this, but the outcome is assured. It's like checkmate in 12, whatever. Like there is zero path to victory for Ukraine without NATO troops, literal troop involvement. Even if we continue to give them money, continue to give them missiles, unless we were to give them nuclear weapons or direct troop involvement, and I mean like hundreds of thousands of U.S. troops on the ground, not just a handful of Green Berets or something, or even like a division. We would need hundreds of thousands of U.S. or NATO troops directly involved, dying, fighting Russia directly in open conventional warfare to take back Ukraine. With at least what they've already lost, it's absolutely over in that sense. That unless we literally go to war with Russia, just directly, it's done. It's over. And anyone saying otherwise, I don't think is either completely unrealistic or is just being dishonest. And I think Trump realizes this. Obviously, people are saying like, "Why are you being so nice to Putin?" I'm like, "There's no niceness. He's just not being directly adversarial. I think he knows what's going on there, and he wants to try and set up some sort of agreement where we can get anything back out of the situation other than literally saying, yeah, you won, here's Ukraine. You know what I mean? Trying to get any benefit now beyond this because we have no cards. They know that we're not going to go to war with them. At least they know that's extremely unlikely. And so they can just keep grinding it out, killing more and more Ukrainians and a higher percentage of their population for a couple more years until they eventually run out of troops and they get the whole thing then. You know what I mean? So, but what I've seen is that now because the way US is such a boner for Israel, Trump included, and I'd said this in my pre-election thing, that's one of the things that we know he's going to do that's not smart or is not good for America. Even though there's so much that he's going to do better, this is one of the things he's going to do that's not better is slurping on Israel's balls and continued spending. He's not going to meaningfully reduce spending. He might be able to take it away from areas where it's a complete waste or it's being used to launder money or prop up elements of the deep state and stuff, which is awesome. But he's not going to get rid of the deficit, let alone the national debt. It's pretty much impossible without going, absolutely insanely ham and changing the entire monetary system. So he seems dead set on supporting Israel's wishes in Iran, but it does mean that that requires them kind of to give up or at least move away from Ukraine. And they might be able to tell some elements in the U.S. government, like, hey, this is actually better because if we fuck up Iran, that'll weaken Russia and China and might give us some, bargaining power advantages there. Who knows? But all we can hope, at least, is that all the stuff that Trump's saying is just stuff that he's saying. And that has been his MO. He always says all sorts of stuff, sometimes to as a negotiation tactic, sometimes just to see what lands and what doesn't. And it's rarely what he actually ends up doing. And if it is, he's certainly able to pivot right away. Um, Stuff like the tariffs he'll do and then stop doing. Other stuff he'll, change his mind on. So that's a good thing. And it does mean that you just shouldn't really take everything he's saying at face value, but it's certainly, I know native Canadian prepper is just absolutely convinced that we're 100% going to direct war with Iran. It's heading that direction, but again, I hope that this could be sort of like maybe a negotiation tool as well and doesn't actually come to fruition, but we have to prepare it in case it does, because that's a hell of a lot more likely that something will happen there than that we will escalate with Russia, because we have nothing to gain from escalating with Russia, especially since the choice there is a direct war with Russia and a near peer adversary. And now, even though Iran is hardly Iraq or Afghanistan or anything like that, and it would be such a disastrous quagmire to go and open war with them, it's not Russia. You know what I mean? Like, we absolutely would win against Iran, especially, but it could be a huge disaster, especially for the economy. But it still isn't Russia. They don't have thousands of nuclear weapons. They don't have, tens of millions of, they've half the population of Russia, that sort of thing. They don't have the force projection that even Russia does. They do have pretty substantially advanced missile and drone technology, but nothing that we could still. It wouldn't be a question of whether we would win. It would just be a question of how expensive and long lasting what our actual goal is there. It seems like for whatever reason they're just absolutely hell bent on stopping Iran from having any sort of nuclear capability, which I think it's not worth the price that they seem willing to pay. Male Team 66, Mule Team 66 is hi, Lord Among Us, been a while. Yeah, man, glad you could stop by. 45 watching, 18 likes, you say? Yeah, go ahead. Hit the like button if you want. Don't smash it though. That's rude. Just diddle it. Click it. Iran. We sophisticated say Iran. Yeah, exactly. Iran. The Persians and Chile and Pakistan. Yeah, exactly. We can say all that. Um, it is Iran. And so I certainly hope we don't go forward with them, but and honestly, it may be conscious effort on the part of the government as a group to do this sort of thing. It's always been an old school kind of strategy slash, canard or just statement that, you know, if you need to juice the economy, you go to war. And if they really are foreseeing epic uh, economic turmoil coming in the markets, which I still think is very likely to happen in the next few months. We're seeing all sorts of weird patterns in the stock market matching up with 2008 and other times. Gold and silver are signaling just total disaster, potential disaster coming, and inflation is certainly not going to go away with what Trump's doing. He's shown no sign that he's going to do anything that would significantly get rid of the inflationary forces that are already pretty much baked in. And maybe they think it's better to be able to blame that on some kind of war and just juice federal spending. They think they can get everyone on board with spending trillions and trillions of dollars that we don't have when it's against the evil Iranians, if not Russians, and we have a much better chance of avoiding direct U.S. troop deaths in Iran than we do with Russia, because sooner or later you're not going to take them over without invading them. So eventually that would have to be NATO troops, but they could do a lot more proxy type stuff and long range cyber attacks and missile stuff. And Iran doesn't have the same level of space and satellite weaponry and stuff that Russia does. So it's nowhere near like going up against Russia, but it would be a hell of a lot more messy than I think most like neocon and Republican types really think. Ethical preparedness. What's up, sir? Says good evening. I just got here, but my wife will probably make me get offline soon. She's a boss. Well, glad you could swing by for at least a little bit. Appreciate it. You guys should all go check out his channel if you haven't got a chance. Good stuff there. Um, yeah, so like I said, we're just going over exactly why I think we're in for a tumultuous rest of the year. I don't think we're going to escape economic turmoil, and they may use the war footing and expansion there to not excuse it, but to paper over it or think that they might as well um, do something. And he said, Nick, sorry, man, I'm getting old. And also, when I play poker all day, I wear these usually. And then when I take them off, my vision is worse, so I have to wear them again. He says, what would you say is the biggest threat? Oh, who would you say is the biggest threat? I mean, literally the biggest threat, the person with the biggest ability to harm us would be Russia or China. Because they have the combination of conventional weapons, nuclear weapons, satellite and space-based weapons, cyber capabilities. I don't think if you're talking about you're sitting in your home in America whose troops are more likely to shoot you, it's nobody. Like we're not going to get invaded. Um, Even direct attacks on U.S. soil are going to be extremely unlikely unless we get to all-out nuclear war. But if you're talking about just the military bases abroad, who could soak up the most amount of our resources, then yeah, it's Russia or China. If you're talking about who is the biggest threat and who's like most likely to actually directly attack us, I still think it would be state-backed or state-adjacent terrorist actors. Like we always keep hearing about how there's tons of different terror cells or sleeper cells potentially in the U.S. We've had unchecked immigration for a long time, and so I think the most likely cause of destruction here in the continental U.S. would be related to the Iran or Iran conflict, and it would just be terrorist types attacks in the U.S. I think is the biggest risk to individual Americans for sure. Um, that or just domestic uprising. We see all the insane amount of shit that people are doing just because of how much they don't like Elon Musk, smearing shit on people's Teslas, fire bombings. But there's plenty of these people who are just outright Marxists, terrorists, basically, who hate America, hate, the legacy Americans, or just people who actually like being American for all their perceived injustices in the world. And there's a lot more of them, unfortunately, than there are even sleeper cells or whatever. So that sort of, yeah, or some kind of biological weapon, like Jason Schmidt says. But even that would probably require a direct involvement of a state level actor. So certainly we know that Iran sponsors terrorism and would give a lot of resources and technology to the people who were fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like they're credited with developing the whole EFP IEDs, like the explosively formed projectiles, like developing that technology and giving it to the rebels or terrorists or whatever you want to call them in Iraq and Afghanistan. So they're not stupid, you know, but they may be insane or ideologically uh, crazy, but they're not stupid people, and they have a pretty sophisticated level of military technology. They have a decent population. So yeah, so I think for us, the biggest for the average person who's not in the military, especially if you're not in a giant city that would be at a big risk of terror attack or even the civil unrest, it's going to be disruptions in supply chain. It's going to be expensive, how expensive stuff will get, how hard it will be to get, and economic problems as a result of all this. So I still think the best bet is to be able to supply as much of the normal stuff that you need. If you could have, some level of electrical generation via solar, wind, gas generator, whatever, few months at least. I would aim for 3 to 6 months of food storage and medicine and toiletries and all the stuff you need on a day-to-day basis, and put as much of your wealth that you want to keep in real items. And then food production, if you can, is great. If you can have chickens, if you can have sheep, if you can have garden. I like growing stuff that is, I think it's beneficial to grow stuff that is more calorie dense. Uh, Grains are good, they're calorie dense, but they're pretty hard to grow and take a lot more processing than something like potatoes. I think potatoes and fruit trees specifically are fantastic. And what do oil prices look like in a hot war with Iran? 100 plus barrels overnight? I mean, I think 300 plus a barrel overnight if it goes hot with Iran in like a real way, like they shut down the Strait of Hormuz, everything like that. I think just the reaction to that initially. would be close to 300 bucks within a couple days for sure. Canned beans is an alternative form of gas storage. Yeah, uh, definitely can be, especially depending on what you're used to. Just have to be able to harvest that. I like the sun ovens is great if you have a way like fuel-free way to prepare food. And just think about what you would need to have to not have to go to the store for a few months in an event that all this stuff goes weird. Store a little gasoline. For some people, it's gonna be pretty simple. You don't need if you even if you're in an apartment, if you have some water, some food, some medicine, some toiletries, a way to create some light, possibly some communications, any medical things that you normally take, and then I would add in things like antibiotics and stuff like that. That's not that crazy of a preparation plan. For like a couple $1,000s, I know it's a lot of money these days, but given what we're seeing in the world, I think it's very prudent to put that aside. Um, for like a few $1,000s, you could have all of that taken care of, especially when you look at like what PSA is doing with making firearms so cheap and abundant. You can get a pistol, some kind of AR-15, mags and ammo and everything for like $1,000, and then you spend a couple more thousand. And most of us have some of this stuff already, especially the guns. But then you spend. I showed you in a past video how you can do a month's worth of food supply storage, even with crazy prices now for just over $100 in terms of calories. So you spend 300 to 500 bucks on food, and you've got a few months worth of food, and even some good, stuff that you really like mixed in. And then you spend a couple hundred more dollars. I should do a video on exactly what I think would be like the base 3 to 6 month survival plan with everything you need. And then the most expensive part, honestly, is if you want to start talking about any significant amount of power generation. But if you're just talking about cell phone, some LED lights, maybe a radio, you can get a little like battery pack that you would like use for your cell phone, like the big ones. They're actually not much bigger than this a lot of times. And anything you can run off USB, and then a little solar panel, 18 watt, 20-watt solar panel. And you can get both of those for probably $100. And you could use all sorts of little electronics. You'd have all the light you needed if you're using LEDs, charge your cell phone, that sort of thing. If you need anything beyond that, if you want to talk about running a chest freezer or running fans or anything like that, you would want to get a power station or a generator. And the power stations are much better for apartment or close urban living, and not everyone can hear it. You can run it indoors, but you would have to have somewhere to put your solar panels. Cipro has the longest shelf life for antibiotics according to our military. Antibiotic shelf life, I don't think is much of a concern for average people. They've done, they've studied it, they've looked into it. Most of those normal antibiotics will work for decades. They will lose some efficacy or effectiveness, basically potency. So you might have to, if it's been more than like 10 years, you should up the dosage. But I would be Cipro is a good, powerful antibiotic, but it is potentially dangerous in terms of its reaction, the human body's reaction to it. It can make like your tendons brittle, and like people are known to snap, specifically their Achilles tendons will like snap and shit on Cipro sometimes. So you wouldn't want to take Cipro unless you have a severe infection that it was necessary for, septicemia or something like that. You shouldn't just be like, I've got a sinus infection, oh, let me take some Cipro. Like, no, you take a Z-Pack or something like the zithromycin or one of the other um, more minor ones. So that's definitely something that actually comes with the Jace case and some of these other ones is um, the information that you need on dose and what to take for what. Like if you have a bladder infection or a urinary tract infection or like an infected finger versus a sinus infection versus you have some sort of intestinal infection. And then the what's the one? It's Dr. Peter McCullough's company, Wellness, I think the Wellness company. They include you can get like the parasite stuff like fembazidol, I forget how you say it, and ivermectin, which some people think has cancer fighting properties as well, but just for actual anti-parasitic. And you can get some sinus and throat rinses to help that are really good at preventing you from getting things like bird flu and like COVID and like influenza. And then you can get all the antibiotics as well. So they have some pretty good stuff over there too. Didn't know about Cipro. They hand that shit out like candy too. Yeah, you got to be careful with that. Like ciprofloxacin and the chlorofluoroquins or something. It's that class of antibiotics can be very destructive. Yeah, print all that stuff out, the dosage chart, what you would use it for. Yeah, Cipro has serious side effects. Exactly. I would not use it unless your life was seriously in danger. If you're just like, I have an infection, don't take that. Yeah, Fenbendazole and ivermectin have extremely low side effect profile. You could literally just, some people take it as like a prophylactic, like a preventative, especially, not in major doses. One of the older antibiotics turns toxic, I think, is erythromycin, but not sure. Okay, I'll have to look into that. I know that in general, they're pretty good in terms of storage. It's not like bleach or something that gets really weak after 6 months. Like you can store antibiotics for quite a long time if they're, airtight, cooled, that sort of thing. Um, and think about how many times you've needed antibiotics over your life. In a disaster scenario, that risk would go way up. But most of us are not taking antibiotics every year. You know what I mean? It's you get an injury or infection or something like that. So having a little bit of these on hand would be great. You're in a weird situation, you're cooped up, you get some sort of serious infection, one of your group does, and you have to do a course of antibiotics. Um, so and a couple $100 is easy spend in my mind for something like that. That is literally what separates us from, you know, 200 years ago. It's crazy. Up until recently, when I had my spinal tumor surgery, I was one of the few people that I knew and in my family that I could be like, I actually like everyone else would have been dead without modern medicine for various reasons. Either severe asthma that needed like extreme intervention, like kidney infection, different types of surgeries and stuff. And I was one of the few people that I was like, I haven't actually had any medical issue that would have killed me 200 years ago. And now even that's changed for me. I would have died in horrible, horrible pain while they tried to get the demons out of me. Well, not 200 years ago, they didn't think it was demons, but they weren't doing complicated neurosurgery. I just would have been probably just eventually paralyzed. I don't even know if it would kill me. Hopefully, it would kill me. But antiparasitics, I think, as for their explicit purpose of getting rid of parasites, is pretty important to have on hand because that's something that's kept at bay by modern sanitation, modern society, all that sort of stuff that could come roaring back in a big way if there's widespread grid down type issues or sanitation issues or food quality issues, contaminated stuff, that sort of thing. Especially if you have animals and things like that on a farm, like it's much more likely that you could get some kind of parasite. So having a couple courses of antiparasitics are good just for that, let alone all the other stuff that they could potentially be used for. So that's what I think you should do. And I think the biggest impact for most people will be in like the economic, financial type arena. So you want to stack real assets like neutron star hearts formed in the heart of dying stars. I like to say that. Chunky. All the points on the board are, like I said before, all our entire economic system now in the West is based on points. It's like a video game. It's meaningless. And when it comes down to it, when the lights go off, there could be a lot of supposedly rich people who don't actually have anything. You could have millions, even billions of dollars if it's in stock, if it's in crypto, if it's in um, different types of assets, even gold and silver, but stored somewhere else. And when the lights go off, how many billions does it take to summon light out of thin air or to create food? Can't be done. It doesn't matter how much money you have somewhere else, especially if you can't sell it, you can't buy anything with it. You have to have the stuff that you need, the physical items that you need, whether that's the food, whether that's the energy, whether that's the currency, to have it in your hand. And some of that includes physical. I just got back from the poker room. Physical currency, paper. Um, there's a good would be a long time, I think, in most disaster scenarios where cash would still work and would work better than gold and silver. If you're talking about like the grid went down now, there would be at least a couple days, maybe even weeks, especially if it was, relatively contained and not the whole country. But even if it was the whole country, there'd be at least a couple days where I could get a lot more with a few $100s in cash than I could do with this because people aren't not everyone's preppers. They're not thinking this is the big one. They think that, okay, when I get back to a place where the power is working or whatever, I'll have real money. And they're going to be like, what am I going to do with this? I would have to find someone who wants it. They don't understand it. They don't know how to check and see if it's real. Um, so having cash on hand, I think, is hugely important for most scenarios, especially if we're talking about cyber attack. We're at a hugely inflated risk compared to the normal of cyber attacks, and everything is connected. I think I was listening to a Canadian prepper video, and he was like, "How long do you think the ATMs would last in the grid or would before they were emptied in the grid down. And he was like, "Oh, it'd be a day." And I'm like, "They would never be emptied in the grid down unless they were cracked open because they wouldn't even fucking work. You couldn't even get a single dollar out of them. Even if the grid's not completely down, if they lose an internet connection to validate what's in your account, it's not going to let you pull anything out. It just might not even work at all, even if something minor local substation or radio or cell tower or something doesn't work, or if one satellite gets something weird going on or hacked or whatever, and everything is connected like that these days. You can hardly log into your email or your bank account without it having to send something to your phone and authorize it. And if any one of those stops working, your email, the website itself, your phone itself, the transmitting between the two, the power to charge it, if any of that goes down, it all goes down. And yeah, it could be pretty bad. So you got to be ready for that. Yeah, cholera could make a devastating comeback. Any of those things that we don't really have to deal with anymore because of modern sanitation. Formed in the heart of P. Diddy. He is one of our darkest stars. Almost died 15 years ago, and they managed to save me in my leg. I'm not trusting the medical field these days, though. Yeah. Cincinnati says perhaps the most overlooked aspect of preparedness is not preparing for the high risk yet everyday things like heart disease, car accidents, slip and fall. Someone I know died from slip and fall. Yeah, and I was actually that's on my list of videos to make because I was when I drove out to Moab, I was switching the stuff from that I have in my car to make sure it was in my girlfriend's car because she doesn't have all the same things, or at least not the same version of it. Like I had my bigger med pack fire extinguisher and stuff. So I need to make sure they're in both. And a lot of people don't even have that. Come on here, talk about, might have a year's supply of food and not have a fire extinguisher in your car, or not have an actual first aid kit in your car all the time, or might not have a upgraded strike plate on your front door. All these things that you're way more likely to like fire extinguishers in your house. Think of how many people, like I said, are killed by heart disease, slip and falls, just burglaries and stuff, fires, huge problem um, related to actual SHTF scenarios. It's not even close, not even close. And yet we tend to focus on the disasters that we see as being bigger, even though they're much more likely. When like if you could, most of us could have had no preps our entire lives, and it wouldn't necessarily have made much of a difference. But there's multiple times that I've had to use first aid kit and things like that. And it's certainly more likely that you'll have to use first aid kit, fire extinguisher, stuff like that than a major grid down event. But got to be prepared for both. There's no excuse to not do either because they're both possible. So let me know you guys if you have any last minute topics. Otherwise, I am going to probably get out of here. But just remember, you have till the end of tomorrow to sign up for the Patreon, paid Patreon member to get the prizes, which 25 free entries is one. The Kudaman bushcrafting survival knife, nice beefy honkin' steel, or Gonzo automatic knife. And if you haven't had an automatic knife, you definitely need to experience it. And this is a sweet, I like that like flat grind blade shape, nice point on it. Not too giant, big enough to get the job done, and those are brand new. So Costco has great fire extinguishers. Yeah, I'm okay with getting them. I've gotten some off Amazon. I can put some links in here later. I just got a new bracket for mine in my truck because I upgraded the under seat storage in my little truck into a metal one. It takes up a lot less space, so I get a lot more storage because it's not as like rounded and beefy, and it allows me to actually attach some like stuff on the front or sides too. And so I got a bracket for the fire extinguisher that I'm gonna throw that on probably tomorrow. And yeah, that should do it, guys. Appreciate you watching. And if you didn't see the beginning of my video, go check out the last video I posted, not the live stream, but the last video I posted on my channel yesterday or the day before about the canyon swing I just did in Moab, Utah. It was super fun. If you're into that sort of thing, I recommend it. It was the link to that company is in the description, so you guys can check that out. William says, sorry, just got home. Sorry, I missed tonight. No sweat, my friend. You can check the replay, and I appreciate you showing up at all. Thanks. And because I'm just about to get out of here. But I appreciate you guys watching, and I will be talking to you soon.